If you like degenerate gacha games, you're gonna love this. But if you love good stories, good combat, good characters, or good music, you're probably not. Hey, my name is Stix and welcome back to the worst gacha ever, a video series where I discuss a gacha and tell you guys what I thought in explicit detail as we attempt to find the worst gacha ever. If this is your first time here, consider subscribing to the channel, hitting that little bell notification. That way you remain up to date with every single thing that I post, and I post every Sunday. Do not miss out. Now pull out your Dorito bag, a can of vanilla Coke, and let's get talking. You start off with an introduction to the game. You're the typical gacha protagonist, amnesiac, and before I noticed the enormous assets on the very first character we see, I realized that there was no lip flap movement at all for cutscenes. Rather, during the story, characters are just still, lifeless, emotionless, which is a major disappointment. After seeing the fluidity in Zenless or Wuwa, going back to something that looks older than Fate Grand Order immediately deterred me from playing. But I'm a real gamer, so I soldiered on. I knew that there was more ahead to enjoy than lip flaps, right? This is a world in which cybernetic, alien-like creatures have begun their assault on humanity, and it's up to us to save it with our army of salacious sirens. And the odd, weird, furry. Yeah, this game caters to everyone. After the tutorial, we're thrown directly into the game and given our first selection of characters to pull for. In a lot of games, you're forced to re-roll until you get the character or the characters that you want. In Haze Reverb, they give you an infinite re-roll, but they limit the selection of characters you can attain, kind of defeating the point of the feature, honestly. Characters are hit and miss. There are a lot of characters that I'm unable to show you guys due to the design choice. But let's go ahead here and take Lilith. She looks phenomenal. So does Alice over here. There are a few others of equally impressive stature, but then half the characters are little kids. This is quite the hardcore gacha, the kind you don't want to play around your family or your friends or even outside, and at times you feel a little dirty playing it by yourself. So it creeped me out. Characters and the character system overall was very basic, even for an idle game. You'll notice the upgrade button down the bottom right. That's to level your character. You can upgrade skills, but instead of skill tickets, they require reverbs. These are acquired in the same way that skill upgrade tickets traditionally are, and they also don't function in the same way that skills traditionally do. To upgrade your skills, you actually need duplicates of your characters. Yeah, that kind of threw me off a little bit too. After chapter 319, you unlock gear. Gear is obtained through the gacha system. There are two options, driver gacha and resonant gear, which uses both resonant stones and shield credits, the in-game earned currency. I'm glad it doesn't require premium currency to roll for, but at the same time, gear therefore isn't grindable. You grind for money, and you use that money to pull for gear, but you also use your shield credits for upgrading, so it limits how much gear you can realistically obtain. Every character has 3 gear slots, and all gear can only be equipped by a single specific character rather than a class, meaning you could roll 100 times and never get your character's gear. At least with echoes or artifacts, you might get subpar stats, but any character can equip them. That is not the case here. Gear is upgradable using the same currency that you use for rolling for gear. Yikes. Unfortunately, I never unlocked the core system, but that's because I couldn't bear to complete chapter 4. There are skins for certain characters, and they're where the cultured aspect of the game truly comes into play. Some of these waifus are truly blessed by the goddess. You can level individual driver affinity by offering them gifts as well, providing a passive boost to various stats. Combat is exactly what you'd expect out of an idle RPG. It functions exactly like Artery Gear Fusion for those of you that have played it. Essentially, you field 5, 6, 8, 10 different characters. Each character has their own class archetype, tank, DPS, support. You will not be able to clear content if you omit certain classes. You absolutely need a healer, you absolutely need a tank. Lacking either will lock you from any type of progression. Sometimes you need 2 healers and 2 tanks, 3 healers or 3 tanks due to the difficulty of the encounter, and it scales very quickly. You field several units onto a grid-based battlefield with 3 vertical rows in total. Each row has their own priority in terms of what they attack, and both allied units and enemy units possess AoE abilities that can hit specific rows, both vertical and horizontal. So it is ideal to tackle encounters with the knowledge that keeping units separate will likely yield the best outcome. After you select your units, you'll start the battle, and everything will play out automatically. The entire battle is automated and you have no way of contributing anything. You can increase the speed to 2 times, but that's about the extent of your interaction with the game. Honestly, abilities look pretty decent. The chibi models don't look bad, and the special abilities showcase the characters in full animated HD glory, and it can be very glorious. The thing I dislike the most, I think, is that as encounters get progressively more difficult, they require more units to be used. I don't have the resources to level 10, 11, 12 units. I'm struggling with 6, but I guess it provides you something to work towards, and I'm not against that. I enjoy having and overcoming a goal, like beating up this enormous waifu. There honestly isn't a whole lot to the game. It is an idle RPG, but it lacks much of anything to really captivate you, where some idle RPGs are fantastic games to play on the side due to the number of features they provide you, their story, their characters, and gameplay loop. Haze Reverb just doesn't. I had no motivation at all to continue playing the game. I logged in, I streamed for a little bit, then I logged off to play something else. But let's go through the game modes to give you an example of what there is to do. There's drill, where you drill your waifus hard, real hard. So hard they can't walk straight the next morning. You can hear their moans from the other room. They really do enjoy getting physical, using their bodies to secure an advantage over their enemies. Then PvP, because that's what we're discussing. What are you thinking? Get your mind out of the gutter, sir. Clicking operation, you'll find the main story, a series of chapters with both story and combat missions. These vary quite significantly in total chapters, but generally involve sitting through a relatively basic, somewhat poorly localized story. It isn't bad, but it isn't even decent. Resource allows you to farm numerous beneficial materials, XP items, cores, which you can equip to essentially boost drivers in different areas, in-game currency. This allows you to upgrade literally everything, and is arguably the most important section of the entire game. I haven't completed chapter 4 yet, so I'm unable to see what armor enhancement is, but I couldn't for the life of me keep going. Tactical tutorial is for people with no prior gaming knowledge whatsoever, rewarding you with gems for passing simple instructional content. I skipped this because I'm a pro gamer. And the red tower locked behind chapter 5, which, and correct me if I'm wrong, is likely an endless tower game mode like most gacha games seem to have. That is it for game modes. These are legitimately what you have as playable options. You have a commander's office where you get to pretend that you know what you're talking about. Maybe pull out the ruler, dish out some tough love. This is your everyday resource management feature where you can upgrade, you can loot resources that generate passively, including stamina, surprisingly, which we can never have too much of. The gacha isn't horrible, on the contrary, it's exactly like Nikke's and Tower of Fantasies. There's no pity for limited banner characters, but upon reaching 200 pulls, you can redeem the driver. I hate this. I hate the 120 in Tower of Fantasy, I hate the 200 in Nikke, I hate it in Haze Reverb. The same 200 redeem function also exists for their customized requisition banner, which allows for you to increase the chance of obtaining 2 SSR and 2 SR characters. The Eternal Shield banner also has this feature, and that is the game. If this had fully animated cutscenes, if it maybe provided a little bit more to do, both in terms of content and interaction, I think this could have been a decent game. As it stands, it just isn't. Now let's break down my rating. Content, 2 out of 10. You do the main story, you grind a few resource stages, and then you log out. It's really that barren. Difficulty, 3 out of 10. The only difficulty I found is in the localization. Sometimes they have you use preset teams and don't fully explain what you need to do with your team, so you're left dying repetitiously until you figure it out. Free-to-play friendliness, 4 out of 10. 200 pity for all characters, and in 4 chapters I've gotten 50 pulls. That was it. And some of those weren't even attained in game. But at least you can earn pulls, and there is a definitive pity. Gameplay, 2 out of 10. Animations honestly weren't bad. Combat felt slow and boring though. Graphics, 3 out of 10. Really the only thing that saved the game were its character models, but even those were relatively basic compared to other games that have released recently. Sound, 2 out of 10. Nothing stood out. Background music, soundtrack, it was depressing. Story 3 out of 10. It wasn't horrible, but it really wasn't very good. I went back and replayed some of the cutscenes to see if my recollection of how poor the localization was correct, and it is. Voice acting 7 out of 10. It featured a fantastic Japanese dub, you really can't criticize that. World 2 out of 10. The world looked and felt the same for the vast majority of stages. It was bland, it was generic, uninspired, and just looked really basic. Fun 2 out of 10. I didn't have fun in this game. I've played some fun idle games in the past. This game is not one of those. Overall, I'd give this 30 giant waifus out of 100 tiny husbandos, or 3 out of 10. This was so disappointing to play, as I've been anticipating this ever since it was announced. Hey you, where do you think you're going? Don't you close out of this tab. I didn't give you permission to do that. Sit your ass back down. Click one of the 2 videos that are gonna be on screen in just a moment, and keep watching my content. Keep enjoying my content.